one of my good friends, probably 12 years ago, whenever this kind of came out and I just started getting into it, and I was like, man, this is pretty good. This is pretty interesting stuff. It's cool. It works great. And he kind of made some little, snarky comment about Tenkara.
Yeah.
And I said, I think it's pretty good. And he was a little embarrassed that he said, but he was just like, well, I know you really know your stuff in the mountain streams, so it must have something good to it, I guess. And I said, well, what's your problem with it? What do you know? And he said, well, it's just, kind of light. I don't, he couldn't quite verbalize it, but he just said, I think it's just too niche. It's just got too much of a, it's not good enough for this, that, and the other. And I said, oh, well, okay, I get that. I completely understand that. And I said, and he was from Chattanooga. And I said, so when you fish on the Hiwassee tailwater, what rod do you use? And he said, well, a 5-weight. I said, yeah, so would I. I said, when you come up here and fish with me, what do you bring? He said, well, I like to bring my 7-foot 3-weight. And I said, as do a lot of folks. I said, didn't you go to Charleston for redfish recently? What did you take there? And he said, an 8-weight. And I said, you went tarpon fishing last year? What? He said, well, we were using like a 10-weight. And I said, well, sounds to me like you got a closet full of niche rods. and that's really what fly fishing is. We have all these different tools. Nobody, so I hear, well, what if you hook a big fish? Well, I never hear anybody carrying a 7-foot 3-weight ask what they're going to do if they catch a big fish. You're just as in much trouble with that as you are a 5-weight in these creeks, because there's boulders and rapids and the fish goes, it's tough. So I don't think about the worst case scenario when I'm fly fishing.
Yeah. Well, it's just another tool in the toolbox.
Absolutely.
What is the saying goes? You can get through life with one socket wrench, but I'd rather have a whole set.
That's right.